The other day, I had the good fortune of being reminded of what a friend really is. I was left feeling a lot. Not bad feelings at all, but overwhelming feelings regardless. As you all know, I like to work my life experiences into these videos to create a sort of emotional connection between the audience and my message. In general, I'm a pretty uncaring person. I only get super emotional maybe once a month, and when I do, it's usually just me being prideful for a new milestone for myself or for this channel. These aren't exactly the sort of feelings that are screaming to be put to the page, so I'd usually just continue doing what I do. I play interesting games, I feel things when I play them, and I describe what I felt for you all. This week, however, the feelings had nothing to do with pride, and they were so powerful that I just had to do a video on them. It was the only way I'd quit thinking about the feelings and be able to go back to doing what I normally do. So I tried something I'd never tried before. I scanned my game library, I thought about my favorite albums and films, and I desperately looked for some piece of art that might make for a good canvas to paint these feelings onto. And while I'm sure that piece of art is out there somewhere, I found nothing. After the event that brought up all of these feelings, I did what I always do when I'm existentially stunned and feeling like I have some new understanding of my life. I took a drive and I thought. Getting home, I took a brief look at my library again to see if anything jumped out, and I found Desert Bus VR. Not exactly the most interesting game, it's pretty obvious what this thing's going for artistically, but it fit my purposes perfectly. I need a blank canvas to describe how I'm feeling to you all, and what canvas could be more blank than hundreds of miles of dead, empty road in the Arizona desert? Consider this a virtual travelogue. I've got an unusual past amongst people who play video games as much as I do. The stereotypical loner stuff floated around me when I was young, never fitting in, always feeling alone, and escaping to video games. However, at some point around high school, I met my first serious romantic partner. After a couple years of dating, this shy, insecure kid was transformed into a frankly toxic well of self-confidence. As longtime viewers might be able to piece together, this is when I started getting into drugs and alcohol. However, that's not the end of it. The panic attacks and suicidal thoughts of early high school gave way to an exploration of a newly realized self. Nail polish, cigarettes, drug dealing, sexual promiscuity, night after night of blackout drunkenness, constantly being pulled over by the cops and just barely talking my way out of a search. I was on a dark road. Throughout it all, I had my smoking buddies, but what I didn't realize at the time was that I had one or two true friends. Some who I actively fought against, like my family, who were of course concerned for me, and one who I'd long since abandoned, and would go months at a time without sparing a thought for. This person was, in spite of my treatment of them, rooting for me from the shadows throughout it all. They were actively trying to help me, knowing full well that they would never get any gratitude from me. They were worried about me, and I was so caught up in my self-discovery that I wasn't worried about them at all. I won't go into your personal details here, but you know who you are. This was the only person in the whole world who knew me well enough to not only understand where I was coming from with this new screw-it-all attitude and empathize with my situation, but to pity me instead of laughing at the frankly hilarious irony of my transformation. College and my constant drive to rebel against everything had separated us in a major way, but that person kept me in their thoughts throughout it all. They would occasionally send me texts, which I probably ignored. They would ask the people close to me if I was doing okay, but they'd lost all control of me, unable to get me off of that bad road on their own, but unwilling to forget about me before I started realizing my full potential. Before I quit being such a jerk that I pushed them away in some grand delusion that they were just being creepy. Well, a lifestyle like that ends pretty quickly one way or the other. Once I'd calmed down to the point of only smoking pot every day rather than raising hell like I used to, it was only a year or two longer before I was thinking, why bother? I'm spending all of this money on pot when I'm still just as high as I was yesterday. And wouldn't you know it, almost 3 years off of grass and booze, I'm still just as high as I was yesterday. Shortly after I quit getting loaded, I realized that amidst all my partying, I never stopped gaming, and that I'd earned myself a pretty unique perspective on games, and I'd like to think art in general. So I cleaned up the jumbled mess of thoughts tangled in a web of blunt wraps stuck together with resin by writing them down. I wrote about how Prey commented on the inherent disconnect people have from fictional characters. I wrote about how Thief 2 and Far Cry 2 were glorious examples of ludonarrative harmony. I wrote about the intense effort put into making Dishonored's 3D environments have incredible framing no matter where you went. And I wrote about how Metal Gear Solid 2 taught me that my own opinion on a work of art is what matters most, not the creator's opinion, and how life in general is ultimately never going to exist for me outside of my own perception of it. I learned that I wasn't trying to find the truth behind all of the art I analyzed, but that I was trying to find my truth. I wasn't really talking about Dr. Strangelove or Soma or Bioshock, I was using these works to talk about myself. Boom, I'd found my angle. I'd found what made my content different from other video essayists and poetic analysts. Beneath it all, I was trying to share myself with you all. This is ultimately what I believe led to my success on this platform, so I worked away on the channel and eventually that friend hit me up again. We met in person for the first time in years, reminiscing on the past, giving it further context, but more importantly, by this point I'd regained my respect for that friend, and I now had that opportunity to show them that I wasn't on that dangerous path anymore. I only had a couple hundred subscribers at the time, not much in terms of career prospects, and an incredibly toxic relationship I was working my way out of, but this was such an improvement over where I'd been before. I wasn't trying to win back that old friend of mine, I was just jumping at an opportunity to say to that friend, look, it's all working out now, I've got something healthy that I'm passionate about, instead of the old dispassionate obsession with drugs. They were happy for me. I had all sorts of complicated feelings as I drove home from the coffee shop, thinking about my past in a way that I hadn't before, but that was a really good day. Things carried on like they had been. That friend messaged me a couple times in the following year, wishing me a happy birthday, giving me condolences after the death of a friend, that sort of thing. I'm sure that in the back of their mind, that person was happy I was off the drugs, but still thinking of the path I was on as being pretty damn dead-end. And who could blame them? I was a professional nepotist with unfulfilled dreams of hitting it big on YouTube. But eventually, I got my lucky break, and in a couple of months' time, skyrocketed to the point where I've now surpassed a couple of the channels that helped motivate me to start this thing in the first place. Well, that's when that old friend hit me up again, finally back in town with a college degree under their belt. In any other circumstances, it would have been shameful seeing them. They survived college and I played a bunch of video games. But again, I had my lucky break and I was smack dab in the middle of what might be the most important time of my entire career. I could finally go to this person with something to be really proud of, something that calmed all the voices in my head and told them that it was going to be alright. I was no longer lying awake at night wondering if I was ever going to get out of my parents' house. I was instead thinking about which posters and furniture I wanted to take with me to my new apartment once I'd saved up a bit of scratch. Finally, meeting this person again, for the first time since I was in high school when my prospects were limitless and nothing mattered, I could look at them and listen to what they were saying with a clear mind. I could examine my past with them, and instead of feeling like I was just in another orbit around the flushing toilet bowl of my life, feel like I'd finally crawled out of that. I was no longer a part of that troubled past of mine, it was a part of me. I'd finally conquered it. And as I said, the clarity of mind that this change gave me is what allowed me to really listen to that friend. That's when I realized what I wrote above. They were always rooting for me. Amidst the stress of college, my own cold shoulder, their own fears about their own future, they never stopped caring about me. It didn't matter if I was ignoring that friend. It didn't matter if I was passed out drunk in somebody's car, getting creeped on by some guy who happened to find me lying there. It didn't matter if I was selling pot or tweeting nonstop about how much I loved drugs and hated responsibility. It didn't matter if I was living off of nothing but ramen and sandwiches, or if I was lazily working for my dad at 21 years old. It didn't matter that I had my little hobby of a YouTube channel, and it didn't matter that I was now working my dream job full-time and finally making something of myself. What mattered to this person was that I was alive. Throughout all the distance and time, throughout everything I'd done to them and everything I'd done to myself, they cared about me. As we sat in my room catching up, I got my typical 1,000-yard stare for a second. I thanked them for everything and I ran to the bathroom before they could see the tears I was choking back. Not that they would have judged me. There's a moral to this story. At a couple of points in most everybody's life, you'll meet someone who miraculously understands you better than you could possibly understand yourself. You'll meet someone who will always care about you no matter what you do to them, and you need to hold on to those people. It isn't about romance or anything that fickle, it's about knowing that you aren't ever truly alone. It's about knowing that even as you and them split up and go your separate ways, you won't ever truly lose them. It's about something you can't possibly lose. It's about true friendship. Before I see you all off and go send a message to that friend of mine, I'd just like to verbally thank my patrons for supporting me and allowing me to do weird, sort of out there videos like this that, to be honest, I don't expect to get that many views. I'd especially like to thank the patrons who are donating $10 or more monthly, such as Ahoy Buoy Polly K, Alex Vanderwood, Almost Dead Again, Andrew Melnick, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Big Time Jim, Colin Gajic, Cooper Sutton, Cosmo Borski, Daniel Christman, Darius Fazier, David Kaiser, Duncan Bristow, Fralum, Jack Eisenberg, Jano, John Strange, JP De La Torre, JW, Max Benning, Mixer Rules, Money and Muses, Patio Furniture, CeeLo, Silver Silence, Vladimir's Nordholm, Wolf HD, and Young Master Pig. That big stuff I keep on talking about, it's getting closer and closer, but you'll understand once it comes out why it's a little bit tricky to tell when it's gonna happen. But still very excited about it. Still happening at some point soon, hopefully. End of the year tops, like absolute limit of how long it'll be. But it'll be very cool, and I really can't wait for you guys to see this. But anyways, I'm rambling, so go hug your mother and have a nice day.